we have a little bit of time for some questions. And I'll, as we ask questions, I'll probably turn the laptop around and. So, and also, what we do when we do discussions, I'll chair it, but we take stack, and I use a progressive stack. I try to make sure that people who haven't spoken yet haven't first, but people who face multiple oppressions get more of a chance to talk than first. So, I'll put you on stack. Anybody else for the stack? Ask a question. Sarah and Sada. Anybody else? Amita. Okay, let me make sure.
And then I think Gato.
Is that Gato?
Yeah.
Gato. Oh my God.
So,
Stop. Oh, I didn't recognize you.
precious.
You're right.
And I don't want to make you to print and reduce your job like that. That's fine on your job.
Okay. So I'll do Sarah, Sada, and Amita.
Okay, so I took some notes, and what I really got from it was that the answer to the national question, how do we, work past white supremacy, is unity amongst oppressed people and working class people of color. But I'm in a position where I have the platform to really motivate the young people. And me and Sharon just made a comment in the car to drive up here that, you know what I mean, young people, they're motivated, but how do we make it relevant to them so this could live on? And how would that look? How can the word unity was brought up. How can we really, us as revolutionaries, we already do it, but how do that look for everyday working class people that's not aware or maybe not motivated? What can we do? How do we find that connection? Because I feel like that's the bigger struggle, is getting the unity. And that's where it's always stopped. I was reading about Marcus Garvey and how his whole plan was sabotaged by people in his own organization. So, you know what I mean? It's how do we get unity?
That's a big question.
That's loaded, but
it's loaded.
I don't think we can answer that. But what does that look like, the unity? Because I feel like we have the plan, but actually implement it and it lasting. How do we get that?
Now, would you prefer to do?
Oh yeah,
take a couple questions.
Yeah, or even just comments. Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. So I have Sada on stack, Amita. Who else? Lee. Did I see another hand?
Gato.
Okay.
So my question is about more in a personal level, talking about racism, because there's a lot of things going on in systematic oppression. But how do you think, as a socialist way or with the party, to handle interpersonal racism, whether in the party or out?
My question is about, as you have the rise of transnational capitalism and globalization as a whole, I think that the way that capitalism is evolving is making it even more difficult to really establish a sense of unity, because you also have this big rise in neoliberal philosophy that creates this very individualistic perspective on individuals from all different ranges. So how is it that we are able to kind of work past that? And to add on to that, racism predates capitalism to begin with. This is a horrible institution that has lasted for hundreds and thousands of years. So how is it that we can kind of move past that when establishing a socialist movement?
My question is, we need to achieve unity among all oppressed people. But being a black man and experience in the black community, we have this segment of our community that they call Hoteps. And their philosophy is a lot against anti-unity of the black working class. The anti-gay, anti-women, and we need to be able to get past that. They want to promote black capitalism. We all remember what Malcolm X said, that a bloodsucker, a capitalist, is a bloodsucker. And it rings true today as it did back in 1965. 1964. My question is, how do we break past the hoteps and expose them for the falseness and the disunity they try to promote and fight for unity among our class to drive past that?
The issue of unity, I mean, that is the big. That's the big issue, because our class enemy is united. The ruling class is united. They may, rip each other's throats out about, competition, and, try to outdo, garner more markets here than their counterpart, competitor and so forth. But of course, there's a lot of mergers going on too, because monopoly capitalism is what dominates the world today. At a certain stage it wasn't. It was more competitive, capitalism, although competition underlies it. But today, I just read Sprint and T-Mobile, they're, merging now to be the third and fourth largest, corporate, communications monopoly in the world, or something like that. So anyway, they're gobbling up the competition. So they're united, but they're united mainly against us. They're united against the working class on a global scale. And because that's why you have the Pentagon, and you have, the biggest weapon that the ruling class has is communications, like what you read and what you don't read and so forth. It's the weaponry is one thing, but that's really their biggest weapon, to keep the masses down and confused and divided and so forth. Like you were saying, anti-immigrant, anti-gay, and it permeates down to our class. I remember when I was, before I joined the party, I had all kinds of backward views on gay people. I didn't know. I mean, that was my reality. But it was not. But when I joined the party, that's when it opened up the whole world to me. Not only politically, but also socially and culturally and so forth. So I think that when you talk about building unity, we have to take people from where they're at. We got to accept people that this is where they're at right now, but can they move forward? Can they develop? Can they, develop as a political, as politicals? Which means being open to new ideas, and because the only way you can do that is in the struggle. That's the only way you can do it. You have to, be in the streets, and meet people in terms of that have a common, that have common goals, that have common needs and so forth. I can only go back to myself, because, I just never thought that white people could be progressive. I grew up in the South. I'm from Alabama.
I hear it all the time.
I grew up under segregation most of my life. And so even when I was in college, before I met the party, I thought all white people were racist. That was my reality, But it wasn't until I met anti-racist whites who weren't preachy or lecturing, or they took me from where I was and helped me to grow on my own pace and so forth. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, I'm part of a larger class here. I mean, it's just not, I'm not isolated, and so, but it took being a part of the struggle in order to understand that and to grow from it. And you still grow, you continue to grow. You never stop growing in terms of your political ideas and so forth. So I think, Sarah, we just have to take people, depending on who you have to take people from where they are. If there's young people
They're middle schools. Not
Oh, middle
adult,
school.
but,
Oh, okay.
I was also going to say, you brought, when we talk about Black Reconstruction, well, when you
Yes.
talk about Black Reconstruction, I was thinking like, okay, that is separatism, but I get, you know, how that could be a good thing in a way, like how having your own businesses, your own, you know, schools and being in control of that, how that could be very empowering. But how do you, you know, I feel like maybe you're right. I should just start local, and I feel like I've always try to do that. Like even with my daughter, she'll be 9. Some of y'all don't know. I have a 9-year-old. She almost came today because normally she's with me, Amari. You know, I do that with her, but I try to just keep it local. Somebody else said that make it local and sustainable because it's like sometimes it's too taxing. Because especially if you're oppressed yourself, it can be overwhelming. Like, you know, I have all this oppression, all these struggles, just trying to survive. And then you're aware of this, like, collective wound that we're all, like, trying to heal. And we just like, dang, it's just getting bigger. Now it's a gaping wound and I have a bit sore. And, like, what do I do to heal this? So I definitely think we got to start small.
But you know, the other big part of this is that because of the technology, because of the social media, good and bad, the good part about it is that it has made the world smaller. The communications is just like that. You know, Twitter and Facebook and so forth. And I'm thinking, when you're talking about young people are becoming more radicalized at a younger age. They really are. Think about Colin Kaepernick, what he has done. Colin Kaepernick has gotten 5- and 6-year-olds to take a knee because of racism. That could not have happened 40 years ago when Sharon and I were, you know, and got to, you know, we didn't have social media back then. You know, we had other great things. You know, we had Sam and, you know, and Dottie and, you know, the founding members of our party. We were able to learn and grow from them. And then they sort of threw us out there, you know, that, okay, you're on your own now, just like you all are on your own, you know, like, you know, we're here if you need us, but, you know, you have to get out there and make your own mistakes and so forth. But today, you know, Twitter, it's like you just see, you know, the Palestinians fighting, you know, and so the solidarity, you know, it's from that point of view, it's more, I don't want to say easier, but it's different. It's just a different situation now, and so that's something else that we need to use more of to educate people. Because if you can't, in Arizona, when those 50,000 plus teachers came out on strike, and you could see it right there. You maybe you can't be there, but you saw it right just immediately. And then there's ways of showing solidarity with those teachers, you know, who are on the front line. So, anyway.
Yeah, if I could just say a little something on the question of unity, and you touched on it a lot, but I wanted to highlight it as like the idea of a multinational organized working class is building that unity between the different nations, and you know. I think it was a Fred Hampton quote, is like, when I started Black and White Unite and Fight, like that's when people stopped publishing my stuff, right? And I think that's the attitude the party holds. But I think that doesn't get white people off the hook, and even non-Black people off the hook. But using white people as an example, like they still have the responsibility to unlearn sort of the racist indoctrination that they have, and you know, and they've been used as bargaining chips, especially in labor struggles, and they're, you know, even all these teacher strikes, they're not all perfect anti-racists, but they got to be supported, and if you bring them into a struggle, they're going to be more likely to develop those views.
Absolutely.
And if we're open to them, and I mean, I've seen this concretely working for a union where probably 90% of our membership is Black, but when we meet white workers, they tend to be, you know, socially backward white workers from like state highway shops, whatever they may be, and you know, a lot of the times I know right off the bat, like, ooh, like, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about like your problems in the workplace. But when you bring them in and when you take them to other shops to organize, when they get involved with a bigger union with so many black members, they start to unlearn that stuff. And sometimes it's through a conversation you have to have with them. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes they work alongside black members, and they start to see, like, I had all these ideas about who these people are, and they're just wrong. These people fight just as hard as I do.
Exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Let's keep the conversation going. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
yeah, Sada, Sharon, Cal.
So Andrew just said what we say all the time. You know, there's really no unity except through struggle. Because you can preach theory, and if they're not struggling with you, it's all maybe a concept to them. Like, if they don't live in a black majority area, they're gonna be like, that's just so far away until you bring them into the struggle. But I really mostly wanted to speak on what Sarah said about staying local, because that is just key for staying grounded in where you are. Because when you think about, like, oh my god, the world is a big hellhole, everything is so hard to tackle. We're all individuals, and we're all only one organization. And the DC branch is learning that the hard way, that you have to just kind of blossom where you're planted. And I think that makes it a lot easier, especially for kids, because kids don't. The world is so overwhelming for adults alone. Like, kids just, you know, like, you have to keep it simple and be like, you know, there's really easy ways to teach values without complicating things. Not being like, this is what's happening in the entire fucking world. It's like, too much. But, like, if you keep it local and what the kids can see and feel around them, then it'll make it more practical and believable and not just conceptual and abstract. And I like what you said,
To piggyback on that real quick, you made something I want to make about the social media is great, but I work in Cherry Hill, South Baltimore, which is one of the roughest areas to teach, to live at, because it's like a whole city that literally isolated, and the whole Port Covington and all the laws that's happening around there with Under Armour, they're actually re-renovating all of the schools, and they're in the process, a long, slow process of pushing all of these oppressed people of color out of that community and getting other people to come populate that. But the schools are dilapidated. The school I work at, these 6th graders, they use social media. They're so oppressed, even at 10 and 11. They go, I can't tell that stories, but they go through a lot that a 10 and 11 year shouldn't have to go through. And it's just at a point where the social media is good, but like you said, it's always the flip side, because it's like, it's trendy. It's so romanticized, or what is the word? Like, we see it so much now, whereas though before it wasn't out there. So even though it was happening, people were forced to talk to other people. People were forced to go out in the streets. People were forced to do by any means necessary. You know, that quote, I feel like that's somebody that's don't got nothing. You know what I mean? When Malcolm X said that you don't have nothing by any means necessary. And I feel like technology is so great, but it makes everything so instant, so easy that you don't even want to think for yourself. Like, me and my daughter was joking, they have so many apps for something. Now they don't have a Just Breathe app. We was joking about this. You know, you don't even have to breathe for yourself. Don't think you don't have to breathe. We'll breathe for you. Like, I mean, it was joking, but me and my 8-year-old are having these conversations about technology, about how everything is just, it could become overwhelming. And sometimes people, they look at it and they be like, oh, that's what's happening. So it becomes like close to them, but it's happening, so they shut down. It's too much after a while. So I know, I don't even watch the news anymore, because it's like this, that. And, you know, social media, you have like such serious concrete stuff, and then it's mixed in with like nonsense, like Kanye. Now, granted, he's going through some real mental issues, but it's all this shit on your timeline, and you like, how do I decipher what's real, what's not? And I feel like technology has definitely hurt that, and it's forced people not to be human with each other, like actually talk and have like circles like this, you know, and discussions like that. I just want to make that comment about. So it's, I love technology, but I'm very old school. Like, you would never see me reading an ebook. No shade to ebooks. You know, my book is falling apart, but I'm going to read it, you know, because it's too much, you know. I don't want to read a book from an electronic device. So why is technology advancing so much? Just slow it down. This is me personally.
Yeah. So I have Sharon on stack, then Cal, then Marin. Anybody else?
And I'm gonna get some questions too.
Yeah.
Just be human.
Just fine.
I was going to say to let other people go if they
Oh.
wanted to, but, oh well, whatever. I wanted to say a couple things about what Sarah said, because I thought the question is important, but more from a practical point of view than so much of the theoretical point of view, which is very, very important. But on the other hand, people sometimes want to know how we handle problems, and I think that's important. And I wanted to say something about the candidacy program, because part of the reasons why we have it is sort of to give people a chance to see how people work and relate to each other, not just how much they grow politically, because in reality in 6 months you can't learn everything about what the party's about, and you can only learn about the broad outlines. But what we do hope, though, really is because we have such a strong position on the national question, which Monica talked about, is that we're hoping that we're not drawing people into our organization that overtly have racism as an ideology. So, I mean, I would think and I would hope that we're so strong on the issue and we protest with the Black Lives Matter that we're not necessarily recruiting really backward workers. I'm talking about white folks. Which doesn't mean, though, that people that come into the party that happen to be white, like myself, don't make mistakes or don't have to learn, or, you know, that everything's a panacea or a perfect thing when you're building a multinational party. Not just about the national question, or about, you know, national oppression, but even around women's and LGBTQ and queer oppression, all the different oppressions, people come in with different understandings and even different cultural norms in how people express themselves. So sort of in the candidacy period, it gives us a little bit of chance, but that doesn't mean even once a person is a full comrade, that they're not capable, really, of making a mistake. We're all capable of making mistakes. And I think the process there is, I could go into sort of our organization, but I don't know if I want to get into that. You know, we've, have in Baltimore interim central committee members and that kind of thing. I mean, the hope is that people will bring problems to that committee, to the leadership and the local leadership first, and try to work problems out. But I wanted to talk about more the broad kind of ways in which the party handles things, and that is with patience, with the hope that, if a person who's male identified makes a mistake in terms of oppressed genders or women or LGBTQ people, that, that there's a chance for that person to change. And so we address people with as much patience as possible. But I'm saying this again, we're really not attempting to try to get people in that are not open, that have backward ideas. And then once people come in, the hope is that through practice, people will improve. Because you asked about the internal thing. Sarah's questions, I wanted to touch on this because I think Monica spoke a lot about it. I think it's important, one way to build unity is for a multinational organization, in particular the white comrades, to want to take on fights against racism.
Right.
Even though they may not seem as linked
Right.
to some of the major overall class issues or the more glamorous issues which may be around, and I don't say this in a bad way, but around anti-imperialism or some other issue that people have gravitated towards the party on. For instance, I'll give you an example in Baltimore. It's a small struggle, and I'm not saying we all need to run to it, but there's been a struggle around the historic black colleges and universities on the state, and it's small right now, and it's really by some moderate black forces that we know, and we've been out to their picket lines, but it's not embraced by some of the more radical folks, and it's not embraced by a lot of the standard people might embrace it because the Democratic Party is under attack in this case. Frosch, which is a very popular state's attorney. So you don't see the unions out with this group of people, but we came out with them because it's a struggle against racism. It is a struggle against racism. So if you're out there against racism, then you're more likely to be able to forge that kind of important unity that we need when we're fighting to topple the government in whole, or to embrace workers who are fighting for the things that which Cole's talking about. But that's all I wanted to say.
So building relationships
Can I-
is key.
So one fight.
can I just interject a little bit? To answer to piggyback on what what Sharon said. See, I think we should all appreciate the fact that we are living in the largest imperialist country in the world, and the difficulties and how dare we try to organize a revolution in this country, and a lot of socialist organizations have been formed, over the decades and so forth, and very few of them are left. Very few of them are left for various reasons, infighting, like putting structure before politics and, that type of thing. But our party has always put our politics first, even if we have lack, structures and so forth is something we're always trying to overcome. Like even now, we're trying to overcome it. But what holds our party together are our politics. That's what holds our party. That's the glue. You can always count on that consistency and so forth. So when people come into the party, they have to come in with a certain commitment to the party. I can't speak for Sharon, but when I came around the party, it took me 3 years to join the party in Virginia, in segregated Virginia. So because the party was mainly white. And I had to oh my goodness, the issues were there, and I really liked what the party was doing around Joanne Little and against, working in the black, defending the black community's right to heat, that was a big struggle. But I couldn't reconcile myself with socially, being the first black person. That's what I was, the first black comrade in the Norfolk branch. But what did it for me was not looking at myself as just part of the branch, but part of a party when black school children in Boston were under attack by these racists, being stoned, trying to go to the school, trying to exercise their right to self-determination, go to any school they want to in Boston, and they came under attack. And we organized two buses to go to Boston. And our party, is, with its limited resources, because we had limited resources, we formed a coalition against racism, in Boston. And that was the main demand. If you were against racism, then you were part of this coalition, And 25,000 people came out for this demonstration on a cold, rainy day, a soggy day. And I thought to myself, then the lights came on. I said, oh, this is what the party is all about. Unity, building unity, amongst forces who may not even have ever been in the same room together. But this brought these people together because they wanted to fight racism. And I said, that's the party for me. And so, and it doesn't mean that you don't, because we do live in the largest imperialist country in the world, we all have baggage. How can we not have baggage when we come into the party? Because of the education, being determines your consciousness. So, when I came, like I said, I didn't know who, I never met a Puerto Rican person, but I had a stereotype that was not good. And here I am black, but it was a Puerto Rican person. And so in coming into the party, I was able to sort of wash away some of that baggage, but it took a process. It took a process to doing it through the struggle. So again, the theory is good, and we learn theory and so forth, and that's very, very important because it lays the basis for how you put that theory into practice. That's always the hardest thing, putting that theory into practice. How do you treat each other, even when you come into the party? Because when we come into the party, we're not equal. And and people have that false view. You come into the party, oh, I can just say anything, and tell any, I can, as a white person, I can tell this black person, this is how you should do things. No, you can't do that, But you have to, again, you have to be patient, but you also have to help re-educate, And this is the last thing I wanted to say, and the re-education thing that's ongoing. That has to be consistent. Like, for instance, when I went to the Durham branch for something, they had a sign up. This is putting this into practice, saying, we do not tolerate in this office misogyny, racism, patriarchy, in other words, language. You can't use certain language when you come into this office because it's liberated space. The rest of the space out there may not be liberated, but this space is liberated, and you have to adhere to it. But that's how you help. That's just one way of helping to re-educate people, including our own members. So just remember, when we come into the party, we don't come in as perfect revolutionaries. There's no perfect revolutionary. Fidel was not a perfect revolutionary. He was a wonderful revolutionary, but he wasn't perfect, and he even said so. But anyway, I just wanted to, hopefully that helps to.
Yeah, that answered my question. So
Good.
That was like 2 in 1 right there.
Okay.
Leo, put you on the stack. Next I have Cal.
Just on the subject of unity and re-education and all that, I was reminded of something that just happened last night, actually. Little background, I'm a cook. Been working in the kitchen since I was about 13.
Wow.
And spent most of last year trying to organize my fellow workers back in my city in Canada. So anyway, last night we were like washing down, like wiping the floors, everything like that, and I was talking to the dishwasher, this dude Miguel from Honduras, and he's been here 9 years. We were just talking about how fucking crazy everything is in this country right now. Talking about ICE, talking about a good buddy of his who was actually the sous chef at the restaurant, went back to visit his mother in Chiapas in Mexico, and his mother has cancer. He wasn't allowed back into the country. And talking about all that, and ultimately about workers' rights and labor rights, especially within the food industry, and all the problems that are facing that industry. And in the middle of this, what felt like this extremely productive conversation, Miguel was like, and obviously I'm translating, he was like, yeah, because I don't get why Latinos have such a hard time in this country. The problem is the black people. And it was just like, it's not surprising because I've been in kitchens for 10 years, but it's just yet another example of how well-oiled that system is.
Right.
Someone who gets to this country, been living in Langley Park for 9 years, he is, in his attitudes, absolutely a product of his environment, obviously, because what else could you possibly expect of a reasonable man working poverty wages, and beset by all of these images at every possible turn. And yet, I was reminded of something that Saul Alinsky, the legendary organizer from Chicago, said on the subject of building people's organizations, like neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, just building democratic, like truly democratic organizations. Yeah, exactly, people's democracy. And he was saying that oftentimes, and I saw this myself organizing last year, you have no choice but to play to self-interest before you can play to morality or idealism or common interest even. Like, you need to figure out, okay, what does this person want? What do these 5 people want? Like, maybe I don't agree with their language or their attitudes or anything like that, but what do they want out of this organization? And once you bring them in and begin to demonstrate like what like a cohesive democratic organization can actually bring to a community, to a group of people, then it's a beautiful thing to watch those attitudes just begin to fall away in the face of like real active everyday solidarity and direct action, and the produce of that. And so you know, it's it's a frustrating thing to work with sometimes, right? Because you know, first instinct, especially I think in young people all full of like piss and vinegar, the first instinct to say like, no, that's wrong, like that's not what it is. But like, really, who the fuck am I to tell Miguel like what his problems actually are?
No, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I was just down visiting some revolutionary folk in Mexico, and like the first thing they'll tell you there is like, before you talk, like you listen. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Good comment.
Thank you.
I really like that.
And I have Miranda next.
I was going to respond, ask a question, kind of what we're talking about with re-education. I wanted to ask, when you have a situation among comrades, because like I think we've been circling around, we're all unlearning things, and even like, especially since I joined the party and started coming out of the party, been like catching myself more and more, and like feeling myself unlearn things. So obviously a slow and gradual process, but comrades who have like called me out when I've said things that aren't great, or just aren't right, and that's been like really meaningful to me and like one of the best things. But so like, given that, you know, people have, you know, even like people that are like, I'm disabled, and I feel myself, like I hear myself sometimes think like prejudiced things, like ableist things, because it's in all of us. So, you know, oftentimes people will like demonstrate like patterns of behavior that can be prejudice, and that could be like people who like want more than anything to not exhibit prejudice and to fight prejudice, especially if we're in the party. So how do we address that in a more like tactical way? Like Sharon talked about using patience and struggling together. So I talked about, does anyone have like an instance of a kind of situation like that, or like kind of a method or process of handling that, maybe both like on a like minor scale and then on a like a bigger scale if it's some kind of pattern? I'm curious about that. And then to respond to Cal said, yeah. Just a comment on that, like something really cool about Alinsky, this idea of self-interest, was that he was talking about actually living in like a shared self-interest. So it's both like kind of, I agree, like posing to people, like posing things in the form of like, okay, what do you want? Well, like, here's how you get it, or here's how you can act on that. But also making sure that interest is in the self-interest of the movement, which I think is really cool, because we all kind of have the things we want, and then the movement has what it wants, and there's an overlap there. So I think that's like a really cool concept. Just elaborate on it.
So we'll get to the end. More questions and go back to more discussion. I had Devin next, and then Lee after.
I mean, mine's a little bit irrelevant because we've just covered so much now. But it was really to you and your question of working with children, because in Atlanta I did a lot of workshops with children every month. And the way I would organize material solidarity with them actually turned into the same way I would do it with like other organizations in Atlanta. Just to give an example, in my old middle school, I go and I do like a photography class every month with almost completely black students. And a few years ago, with the new DACA law that was changing, a lot of the Latino students wanted to protest, and you know, they wanted to have like their first kind of, I think they were in 8th grade, like a walkout. And I was trying to get the black students to join, and they were like, we don't like them, you know, why would we do that, right? And in hoods, you often find like black and Latino people don't get along. So I think that political education with children is the first step, and with children, education has to be conversational and dialogic.
Yep.
So I said to the black students, I was like, if you're getting jumped by a group of white racists and your Latino friend walks by, you would want them to stop, right? You want them to jump in and help you. And then vice versa, if they're getting jumped, you would want to jump in and help them too. And they were like, oh, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I said, you know, in this school, the top 2 people for suspensions and detentions are black and Latino people. And they were like, oh, yeah, right? So, I mean, when it comes to, because there's symbolic solidarity, but when it comes to material solidarity, it's like political education all the way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was just talking to Sharon May Day, I'm incorporating political education discussions. We have community meeting, and we have a fishbowl. So we talk. You know, one of the things that was one of the topics was childhood, and then another one was shootings in our community. So we talked about Freddie Gray. We talked about crime in Cherry Hill, and that was really important because I feel like a lot of education. Like I've learned a lot from them, from what just Saul said and what Monica said and what everybody said, but especially them too. Like, we need to have discussions because that's how people learn too. So yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, Lee.
I'm smart about some things that Monica had said earlier. I too was raised in a family where my father hated all white people, said all white people were terrible, you know, and I was at a stage where I used to be a member of the hippie movement, believe it or not, and I was, you know, I was juxtaposed, I was hypnotized by people in that movement who, for one thing, my first taste of getting along with other white people was being a hippie, you know, and yeah, and I, you know, I went home with my father and I told him, Dad, they don't like that. Well, if you don't see things the way you're not gonna get no. All white people aren't bad, but then I had the thought instantly, hatred of white people from black people is the hatred that was created by white supremacy.
Yeah, exactly.
And
not the individuals, but the
and you know,
institution.
when I first joined the party, sure I was anti-interracial marriage and I was anti-gay and I was just, you know, in a relationship then when I was dumped by a Lithuanian woman and I'm so desperate to replace her, I reached to anybody, anything loved me. But being in the party, like you said, there's no perfect revolutionary. We all make mistakes. And you were a great education in a lot of my mistakes. You were. You helped me to understand that we are there to forge unity as a class to oppose this beast of a system that seeks to keep us all down. And I've evolved now to, you know, I was also anti-gay as well, but I've evolved now to understand that LGBTQ people are our allies. If someone is attacking a person because of their sexual orientation, it's my duty to jump in and fight for that. One time I was down Fells Point, and I heard people in the front of me in the crowd talking viciously about gay people, and I just happened to say, "Well, I'm gay," you know, and they immediately attacked me. But I had some friends, you know, who were primarily were women that came in and took up for me, and that was one of the lessons I first learned about unity. I was outside of the party when I did that. I just joined, but I was outside of the play when that happened to me, you know, and things began to get more and more real to me about why we need unity and why we need to fight for class struggle. You know, people should know that gun control is a form of white supremacy because the NRA was created to keep guns out of black people's hands, and it ain't the NRA that's bombing Syria. You know, that's easy. You know, oppose U.S. imperialism. That's what we had to do because U.S. imperialism is what keeps my LGBTQ sisters and brothers down. It keeps my Latino brothers and sisters down. You know, and finally, my last point is when I was out one morning shopping for my table, I heard a black man make comments, anti-immigrant comments. I said, listen, you know, this is not going to get us anywhere. We need to join up with our we need to join up with our Latino and Latinx brothers and sisters because when we fight each other, that strengthens the capitalists. You know, we have to by all means for unity, and in no place did I learn unity better than Workers' World Party, and it's involved me to who I am now. And I feel more Marxist today, more revolutionary now than I ever have felt in my life. Yes, we will give it to capitalism. Capitalism is not here to stay. It's going to die, and it's going to die at our hands.
And one more on the stack is Alec, and then we'll get a chance to answer some of the stuff that's raised.
Yeah, going back to what was said earlier about educating the youth, I remember, I'm sorry,
Sarah?
Sarah, you said you work with middle schoolers?
Yeah, 6th grade in Cherry Hill. It's a whole
Yeah.
city in a city.
I do after school work with 5th graders here in DC, and like what you said about social media and stuff like that is entirely true for them as well. And it really is like a big double-edged sword, because like you see the sort of trends created by the capitalist media within social media to sort of perpetuate the ideology inherent in capitalism, which is your own self-worth is based off of how much wealth you own. And you see that a lot even with like children of color and immigrant children as well, because like they're experiencing it at the same time as even like white kids. But like the way like they give us like a curriculum to like follow, and it's like very like hard, like follow this or else. But they do like, it is like a social justice theme sort of thing, although in like a very like liberal sense. But like the last lesson we had this year was for solidarity, and so like we were talking about global water crisis. And like the way I always do it is like introduce it in the form of like, why do people have to pay for water? Why do we have to do that? It's a thing that we rely on for our own like life. Why are we having to pay somebody else for that? And you do get like kids question it. I remember one was like very interested on the subject. It's like, I don't understand. Like, why do we have to pay for it? It doesn't make any sense. And it's like great seeing like these little 5th graders like actually question sort of thing.
Got one more in the stack. It's Harvey, and then we'll.
Okay, cool. I was thinking about Monica's remarks about black capitalism, and I think that like DC is really an interesting place to think about that, because the late Mayor Barry, both what made him good and him bad was that, you know, he was someone who, you know, really tried to make capitalism work for black people in DC, but you know, but he found himself caught there, you know, because for every you know, like good thing that he could deliver to, you know, poor black people in DC, he had to give away even more to, you know, the rich, you know, and so like being caught there, even like the little good that he was able to do still got him framed up. And of course he came back, got elected again. Bill Clinton got so mad he took away all his power. You know, so I mean, I think that like looking at that closely, there's like sort of a lesson there that, you know, pretty much even like the best black capitalist there was, you know, as like much good as that did for him and as much good as that did for people in DC, it was so profoundly limited that I think, you know, the gains that people made during that time have been more or less reversed in DC, and it's gotten worse for, you know, people. So
can I respond to that?
Sure.
I'm not just because I'm a Washingtonian, born and raised in DC, and also worked for Mayor Barry's campaign several times. He also got me my first job. I was like 14 years old. But we have to. This is why, in a party like Workers' World, you have these political discussions where it does give you the education. Just one note I want to give to you.
Sure.
When I went to Cuba as a CP member in '77, Vince Ramos Brigade, there was a lot of division among some of the folks who were strongly nationalists, cultural nationalists, and some of them who were like myself, or Marxist-Leninists. What happened was, it got kind of raw because I started dating a white comrade, and a lot of sisters and others were like, "See, that's what happens," blah blah blah. And I don't know how it got around so much, but because we were with Cuban comrades too all the time, we were building a memorial for the fallen revolutionaries, the heroes of in South Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Fidel, the late comrade Fidel, got wind of it. He called a special meeting of the brigade and pulled folks over. I mean, the speech, he didn't have no paper. It went on like 2 hours or more, maybe 2.5 hours. What he was talking about, you haven't seen examples that exist in this country. We got the pioneers, we got, pioneers, we got revolutionary organizations, our school. Didn't you see when you walked in the classrooms, there's pictures of Che Guevara, there's pictures of, Agostino Neto and stuff like that. This is the part of what we have to do in Cuba. He said, this is what our job is. Continue the revolution. Continue to move it, continue to educate. And for me, the thing is, it's true about the capitalists with Marion Barry. That is true. But the educational part is Marion Barry's background, he was a member of STIC.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them, let's say this, they weren't socialists when I was a socialist or a Marxist. So their thing is, they're not trying to pretend to be that. So we have to understand when we evaluate people, political people, politicians, Trixie, we have to evaluate them on even what they give us and their behavior. So, and of course, DC, we have also, as a Washington, we have to look at it in its colonial status. There's some parts of DC, it's like a colonial status with a little small plantation in it. So we have to be very clear about what the question is on self-determination. In this case, clear. We have to be aggressive about telling people this. All my girls have been to demonstrations. I got grown kids, I got grown and grandkids. They've been to party rallies and everything from the Workers' War Party. Their consciousness is like when they go, they're representing Marxists. When they go, they talk about feminism. When they go, they're talking about Black Matters. They understand this because I made sure it was everything that was a part of their education as a child. So we have to be very clear. There's a new symbol in DC. If you look at it, some of you may not even know this. When some new white folks moved to DC, I'm not kidding, they put out a red, white, and blue flag. That's an imperialist flag to me. You understand that? That's hated by me. And they are in neighborhoods that are not totally gentrified yet, or ethnic cleansed, or economically cleansed, but it's a cleansing going on here. And it hasn't been done totally, but it's on its way. And my anger is not at the individuals. My anger should always be channeled back to what? Capitalism. You see? And what it breeds in people. So the humanitarian side about an organization like this, we have to get that message in our soul. We have to be very careful. Whenever we look around, when I left Cuba, I came back here and I was like, man, this is a culture shock. Because it was McDonald's, it was like, a Waffle House, and all this. I'm like, Lord, I gotta go back. They said, you was already down there, guy, though. You stayed there for a while, do your organization. I was like, no.
Real quick, I'm sorry. How much time do we have
That's it.
with the room? Okay.
So it's about education in the party.
We have no time with the room left.
Oh, okay. So let's let Monica sort of
Did you want to say
sum
something?
up, and we can do announcements.
Just very short.
Yeah,
Just very
Fine,
short.
I'll make
The
it short.
Miranda's thing, just super short. I mean, there's so many answers to that, and I don't want to go. Another time I'll go into some concretes in Baltimore and how we handled trying to learn about the question of oppressed genders too. But I did want to say this because I failed to say it earlier. The party has historically had a people of color caucus, a women's caucus, an LGBTQ caucus. And part of that is to strengthen those who suffer from special oppressions inside the party, because strengthening those who are oppressed is also as important as combating, difficulties with individuals. But just very quickly, what we did in one situation is we felt like people didn't understand the question of pronouns. And so we had an education, one of our comrades gave an education on it. And, we just work with people. And to this day, people sometimes misgender, forget, because, especially because we are a group of older people, younger people, as I said, different backgrounds who still are struggling to learn all this. I think the question of, and we had a disabilities caucus too. I don't want to leave that out. And I think some of the stuff that the youth have brought to the movement right now is on the cutting edge, and it's stuff that everybody's got to learn from. And so we'll probably be still evolving and learning and that kind of stuff. And part of it is have an educational discussion on it, bring everyone's political level up, and then, you know, work on an individual basis if somebody's ready.
Yeah, well, this has really been great. See, it's been an education for me to hear all of this. And again, the issue of building unity really means, again, being in the struggle, because that's how you build class consciousness, if you're in the struggle, because, you know, living under imperialism, living under class society, you know, it's been hammered into our class that it's all about the individual. What is happening to you? It's a doggy, you know, you have to get yours before somebody takes it away and all this other stuff, you know. And that's what that's what our class has to fight against every day. You know, when the issue of immigrants, you know, being pitted against black people or any oppressed people. You know, I remember in New Orleans, it was around Katrina. It was an issue of jobs. And of course, black people have always been locked out of, you know, good paying jobs, sort of on the bottom, the bottom of it. But they see immigrant workers being brought in, and this is an example, you know, being paid a certain wage that is higher, just a little bit higher than a black person. So what's in front of them is that, oh, the immigrants are taking away our jobs. And nothing can be further from the truth. It's the capitalists. That's what I mean. The capitalists are so class conscious. They're paying the immigrants nothing, hardly anything, but they're paying black people even less than that. But it's very hard to see who the real enemy is right in front of you. And that's why the education is so important. What Devin said is so important, like, you know, black students not liking immigrants. I would say, well, why is that? What makes you think that? That would be very interesting to see what they say. You know, oh, I'm not, you know, okay. I have to really think about that, you know. So, you know, and it all comes back. That's why I wanted to do. That's why I wanted to open up on some of the history of this, because we just don't know enough of our history. When I was running for president in 2016, I spoke to a group of students in Berkeley, high school students, who had a Black Lives Matter banner. You know, they were very progressive. But when I asked them, I said, how many of you all have heard of Black Reconstruction? No. You know, or Du Bois. Maybe some of them said, you know, yes. But Black Reconstruction, that period, they didn't have a clue. And even some of the most immigrant rights, you know, activists, sometimes they'll get up and say, oh, we're all immigrants. Right. We're all immigrants, you know. And that's not true. Not all immigrants. The indigenous people are not immigrants. They were here. They were the first people here. You know, black people, they're not immigrants. We were forced to be here, you know. So that's what I mean. But very, you know, well-meaning, you know. But they just didn't know. And I had to say, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. Oh, you know, and then you explain. But that's what I mean. The history is so distorted. You know, in Texas, they have this. Somebody put it out on our chat. We have a chat where we share articles that are not Workers' World Party articles, and educators in Texas wanted to put out this survey asking what were the positives of slavery. What were the positives of slavery?
I saw that.
Like there is such a thing as that. So this is what I mean. This is, you know, this is the miseducation that our young people are going through right now. And so we have to counter that, whether it's through political education, film showings, whatever it takes, wherever we have to take young people from where they're at, wherever they're listening. Hip-hop music, the most progressive, you know, analyzing that, whatever it takes to get them to start talking politics. Politics. not just about what's happening, taking from where they are as an individual and then expanding that to connecting to other people. The issue of black capitalism, I wanted to raise this. There was a certain period where, you could see supporting, the right to self-determination when it came to black capitalism. Tulsa, Oklahoma, and back in 1921, there was a Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to counter. So black people wanted to. So what? The black people wanted to have their own businesses. Why? Because white people aren't going to hire them. They can't control their resources. So they decided to start their own, Black Wall Street based on the oil. A lot of oil in Oklahoma and other things. It was burned to the ground by the whites, and like white and black people were lynched and so forth. It was ignited by something else, but in essence, that's what it was all about. So you can't go back to that capitalism anymore. That was a certain capitalism. It was capitalism at a certain stage of development. You can't really do that anymore. They shut down a bank in Harlem. Harlem had a bank, Harlem People's Bank or something like that. They found every excuse to shut it down. Every excuse to shut it down. And the people of Harlem had the right to their bank. Why not? To counter, Chase Manhattan Bank and, Bank of America, whatever, and the people of Harlem wanted their own bank. And they shut it down. They found loopholes to shut it down. So, anyway, you can't go back to this kinder, gentler capitalism, not that it was ever kinder or gentler. And the last thing I want to say is this, especially for the Washington branch. I was just recently in Salt Lake City a few weeks ago visiting that branch. And we had a meeting, and the comrades were sharing with me, and they're a predominantly white branch, although they work with Black Lives Matter and other forces. And they were saying, we're so small. We're so small, what can we do? I mean, what else can we do to grow? And this is Salt Lake City. This is, the Mormons, and you talk about challenges. That's a challenge. But there is a movement there. There's a movement there. They had a demonstration against Syria, against the bombing of Syria and so forth. So it was very good. And I said to them, listen, you just have to continue to figure out ways to show solidarity with the most oppressed. And it doesn't mean that you have to wait until Black Lives Matter calls something. Yes, you go. If Black Lives Matter calls something, a demonstration, you go in solidarity, with Black Lives Matter. But if you want to reach out, to whites, you can go downtown and have 5 signs that say, I stand with Black Lives Matter. Yeah. And that will resonate with people. So you don't have to wait for others, to be in solidarity with oppressed people. And when oppressed people see that, they see these young whites out there, they said, oh, okay, that's important. That is really important. With the Veterans for Peace, when the immigrants were really under attack by Trump, and they still are under attack, but it was a certain period, this Veterans for Peace, they went to Trump Tower, and they were all white, and they said, I stand with the immigrants. Like 5 or 6 of them. And it was the most beautiful thing, and it got press. It got press. When those young Jewish activists blocked the entrance of the Israeli consulate a few weeks ago and say, stop the occupation, stop the killings in Gaza, that was all over Twitter. It's in our paper too, and that resonates. That's just as powerful as having 1 million people in the street. Even though that's very important too. We want 1 million people in the streets. I don't want to say that, but those type of political actions that show unity and solidarity, they will resonate. People will remember those actions. So anyway, I don't want to end. I want to end there.